Canine Detection Collaborative, a detection dog training trio with Stacy, Barnett,
Hi.
Robin Greubel,
Hey there.
and Crystal Wing.
What's up?
With humor and a big dose of theory, our trio talks practical training advice and features interviews with top trainers and scientists. It's Canine Detection Collaborative.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canine Detection Collaborative. I'm Robin Greubel, and I'm here with my super fabulous co-host, Stacy Barnett.
Hello.
Crystal Wing is lurking in the background because we have an amazing guest today.
Yay.
Yay. I'm like actually nervous because, oh my gosh. Adee Schoon is with us today for a wide-ranging discussion on whatever we can cover in the time allotted that she will give us. I'm actually going to let Adee, why don't you introduce yourself? Because when you type your name in onto Google, you get all of these things. And so give us the Reader's Digest version.
Well, thank you, Robin, for this nice introduction. Hello, Stacy. Hello, Crystal. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be a nice opportunity to just discuss all sorts of things related to dogs and rats and training, and I'm going to enjoy this. Let's just cover my working life, I guess, because I'm not going to go back to my youth. I've been working with dogs for over 30 years. I started off as a researcher looking at the reliability of dogs in performing scent identification lineups. This was something that had been done in Holland for already since the beginning of the last century. But there were questions about how well they were doing, how reliable all of this was. And remember, this is pre-DNA era, so there were not a lot of ways to link people to crimes. And that's how I got started. My background was biology and learning behavior, which is rather special in Holland because that's not really taught at universities, which is why they found me and asked me to do this project. And I ended up working for the university, but with the police in finding basically a better way to do it, because that's what it amounted to. And the nice part was that during the 4.5 years that I did this study, the police also realized that I could bring a kind of knowledge to the canine department that they could not easily get in another way. They had, of course, contacts with organizations that delivered them the explosives that they were training their dogs on. They had contacts with laboratories that provided information on narcotics. But human scent, there's no university. At that time, there was no university doing any kind of work on that. And there was no university or anything else in the Netherlands that could help them with learning behavior. So I ended up staying with them. And it was a contract between the police and the university. And the university employed me, but I worked with the police part-time. But I continued doing that for a long time. And just my own knowledge grew, and all the research things that we did grew. We started off with the police financing the International Florida University, where we had the Florida Research Institute, I should say, where they started off doing the human scent research based on Dutch money, which is nice to see how big that department has become. It's good to know that we were a small part of that. And within the police, I did a lot of work initially with human scent, but the field just expanded and expanded depending on where they had problems, or where I suggested, well, maybe we can do this, or where other people suggested, can you do that? Would that be a possibility? So I've done all sorts of things within the police. And then at one point, it also became more international, because I became involved with Apopo. Apopo was there right from the very start of Apopo, actually. They came to visit the research, the canine unit at the police to ask how to train animals on explosives. So that was the first contact, and I stayed in touch with them. I evaluated their preliminary work for the Flemish government, and then later I got to be on the scientific committee, and then later on the board. So that's been part of the international work that I was doing. And through them, I got in touch with people who were in the demining industry more. And I ended up talking to people training dogs to do that. Got involved in that part. And at one point, the police decided to terminate the contract they had with the university. And so the contract was cancelled, and basically my job was gone at the university. So I decided to start my own company and become more of an independent consultant, because I was already doing the work for the Norwegian People Aid. That was training dogs for demining. So I thought I should do more work like that. Now, the police is still a big customer. They are my bread and butter, more or less. But I've been doing several other projects in different countries ever since. So I've been working on detecting rust in an application in Norway. I've been involved in cancer detection in Holland and in Switzerland. I've been doing some work recently on detecting a particular kind of fungus in the elm trees here in the big cities. So there's new things going on as well. So I really love the area of scent detection and developing new applications and getting all of the knowledge that's out there available together with the people who are training the animals, and try to sort of put some sound structure to it. So checking to see what the dogs are actually learning and validating what they actually do. So.
Okay. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the detecting rust, we'll go back to all of the mining stuff, because that's really interesting too.
Yeah.
But okay, where'd the rust come from?
Well, that was really the oil and gas industry. They have these big rigs out on the sea and stuff like that. And especially this was a Norwegian project. And if you look at the way that those rigs are built and the plants are built, there's lots and lots of pipes everywhere. Yeah. And these pipes are covered with insulation material, but you do need to check them to see if they've become rusty, because everything in those pipes is under pressure. So if they blow, you have really big problems. So it's an industry that is very well monitored, where health safety issues are very well monitored. But basically, to monitor those pipes, what they need to do is they need to take off the cladding, take off the insulation material, do a visual inspection every certain number of years, and then put everything back on, even if there might not be anything wrong with them yet. So it's a very, very expensive operation to be doing that all of the time.
Yeah.
But it's a big industry. And a guy I know, who I met in demining, he had this idea, and he managed to get a project out of it to see if we could train dogs to help in some way, which would not be taking the dogs on board of those rigs, of course.
Yeah, that's where my head was going. I'm picturing these like mass, like out in the. I've been to Norway, and those oceans are not like the oceans that we see like down like by Florida, and what I mean.
I know
they're serious oceans. So I'm picturing bringing the dog in on these one.
No, you don't bring the dogs in, but you take samples.
Okay.
You take samples and you bring them out. So, but we had no idea whether dogs could do this. So we started off with using insulation material that had been collected on these sites. Because if you look at at insulation material from a spot where there's been corrosion, the insulation material has become completely brown, and it's really bad state.
Yeah.
So we got insulation material like that, and we got clean insulation material, also from those same rigs, but had been collected from a spot where there was no corrosion. And we put those into glass jars, and we would send samples from the glass jars and see if we could get the dogs trained on them. And the interesting thing is that we could clearly see, oh, this is a jar, this is a target scent basically, and this is a clean scent. And the dogs were able to discriminate between them as well using a carousel. But we also had samples examined using GCMS, and the GCMS couldn't find any reliable markers for corrosion. So that was sort of funny. I mean, you could see it, but they couldn't smell it. The volatiles weren't really measurable at the time, because technology really goes fast. So so we had that, and then we transferred. So we did it in the lab first, and then we started to collect sampling material. The whole idea was to do a validation study. So we would be collecting samples because these claddings, they have like holes at the bottom because the water, if there is condensation inside, the water can drip out. And we were planning to use those holes to take the air samples. But equipment on those kind of rigs is also something because, nothing with electricity can be used because of the static and stuff like that. So you have of these air drill suction kind of things that need a specially adapted kind of thing to be able to work there. Wow. But we took samples prior to them taking off the cladding. So we would have samples and then know, okay, but this one was taken from a location where there actually is rust and these are clean, so we had some kind of result. We knew what we were giving to transfer them. So we did that. And then we had double-blind testing of samples. And the good thing was we found a couple of spots that they had missed. Because we gave feedback, so no, we have 4 dogs on this and 3 of them are indicating the spot, you better check. And they actually went and checked a bit better because they could detect it from quite a distance. So we basically showed that the dogs could be used for this purpose, but the challenge, they're not being used operationally because the challenge becomes how to integrate this into a system where everybody already has their role and where there's a lot of money involved. Yeah. And basically what you should be doing with these dogs is you should be adding, starting to use them, and you should add the information of the dogs to like an artificial intelligence system that they were already using to determine where it is most effective to do your maintenance work. Where are the chances that you're going to find rust? Include, because they have these drip systems. If there are areas where the water is really dripping out, those become hot spots. And, where dogs indicate should also become a hot spot. And then you can integrate it to and become really very effective. But that business side wasn't really, we didn't get to develop that business side of it, which I think is a pity because it's still a very good use for dogs.
I mean, it's another example where a lot of times we can see that the dogs almost seem to surpass the capability of the technology in a lot of cases. And we see this, I mean, it's not just, this example. I mean, we're kind of, does the dog detect explosives better than a device or, things like that. And it's another example of that. And you're right. It's an absolute pity if you don't get a chance to actually utilize the dogs in that capacity. Wow.
Yeah, because you do need to integrate them into the system. Yeah. Because if you do go into a new rig, and if you're going to use another kind of insulation material, they will need a little bit of recalibration, of course. So it really has to become an integrated part of what you're doing. And I think that's where that and the fact that you really need to stay on top of the training all the time.
Yeah.
Too.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I think that's what there are too many situations where well-meaning people that are not very critical about what their dog is actually doing think their dog can actually do something, and but it's obvious that they can't because they've just missed something that they're not paying attention to. They mean well, but they don't have the background or to be able to be objective about it. They don't know why you should be doing double-blind studies and stuff like that. And if people who want to see the bad side of dogs will focus on those examples. And people who want to see the good side of dogs will focus on the really well-trained dogs that are being maintained in a proper way. The truth is somewhere in between, and that's where it becomes difficult. Huh?
So the interesting thing to think about, you talking about the maintenance of the training, when you start looking at the demining efforts that are happening. And let's talk about how those dogs are trained, maintained, and all of that sort of stuff. And then, of course, the really cool rat work that they're doing. So, right? Because that's fascinating. How much, okay, weird. How much do the rats weigh?
Oh, now you're asking me something. They're quite about a kilo. They're not this big. They're quite. They're not very heavy. They're too light to set off a landmine. So that's why
really
their response is also scratching the ground, which is it of course limits where you can use them.
Right.
But it's no accidents have happened so far, and they found lots of mine. So
good.
So Crystal has, I guess she's done some research. She says they're 2 pounds. I'm picturing, when I see the pictures of them, they look like a third of a cat, right? You know,
Yeah,
like that size, like
not that bigger,
or half a cat.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, about a half a cat.
It depends a little bit if you're thinking Maine Coon.
Right.
I'm trying to think of body.
I've seen rats here on the farm, and they're large.
Yeah.
So
they're the African pouch rats. Huh? It's an African species that is indigenous there, and they were chosen because they are sometimes pets in Tanzania, and basically the Apopo chose them because they are an indigenous species, and they wanted to do something that is more just a little bit more natural to have in Africa.
And now, like, how long do they live? Like, is it? I feel like it's supposed to be longer than a standard.
Yeah. They live to be about 8.
Oh, that's way longer than a pet rat.
They're not at all like the Ruttus kind of rats. No, they're hamster rats. That's also the other thing. They're vegetarian, and what they do when you feed them, they get food reinforced. Whatever you give them, they put in their little pouches, so they don't eat it immediately, but they get these really big cheeks. And then when they're finished with their training, they go and sit and digest everything that they've been given. So they continue working. They don't need to like the dogs need to finish what the kibble first. No, they store it and they continue.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, yes. Wow.
So you had done some, I don't know if it was research, but talking about how food deprivation is maybe not the best way.
Well, it's just something that you come across it's not something that I did any research on myself, but it's something that is, what Apopo has noticed and what I sympathized with because I've seen it with dogs as well, with young puppies especially. If you are using food reinforcement, there has to be, to teach an animal anything, there has to be a motivation to actually do something, right? And you reinforce whatever you're using as reinforcement should be something that the animal desires to have. Is it play? Is it pets? Cuddles, or if it's food? There has to be a desire. I mean, if an animal doesn't like you petting it on the head, it's not particularly going to start sitting in order for you to pet it on the head. It's just going to start avoid doing that because he doesn't like it. So you have to look at the animal itself. What does the animal desire? What is motivational for that particular individual? The food is called the primary reinforcer because you don't need to train it. All animals will want food. Well, if you're a Labrador, definitely. But there are certain other species of dogs, breeds of dogs that are less food oriented. And you can imagine that a dog who's completely satiated at some point is not going to be very interested, except if the food is really tasty. You might want to do a little bit to get that really tasty bit of food. So what you often see especially in working with rats, if you use food as a reinforcer, that the animals are kept at not at their full body weight, but are kept at 80% of their free feeding body weight. And that can work. But there is, and if you see that the animal is not performing particularly well, for example, in demining, what they need to do is they need to learn to walk a pattern. If they're using for tuberculosis detection, they need to sort of walk along the floor where a lot of holes in it, or they need to sniff at all of the samples. If they're not moving, if you just sit and start grooming, then there's something lacking. So people will think it's their motivation that's lacking. So maybe we need to increase their motivation, which means they need to be a little bit more hungry. Mm. So they decrease the amount of food. But if you go down that road too far, you're going to end up at a stage where maybe the animal isn't even getting enough nutrition just to be able to walk and to be able to think and to be able to work. So that's a fine line. That's a fine line. And the same is true with puppies. If you have puppies that need to eat several times a day, and you're going to use all of their food for training sessions, some pups will do fine, but other pups will be so starved at that point in time that they won't be able to think. Their minds aren't open enough to seeing what do I need to be doing to actually get more food. They're just too stressed out. And so then food is sort of negative. I need it and I'm not getting it, and it's creating a lot of stress. So that's why you need to have it a little bit balanced. So have something that they really like. And with food, you always have to be aware that the animals don't get satiated, but try to focus on something that is nice for them to eat, instead of focusing on something that they really need just to be able to think and need to be able to function.
I just know from my own experience as a human that if I have to do something where I really have to think and focus, if I don't have breakfast, I'm going to have a problem. And I know personally, just working with my own dogs, like I always make sure that, if they've got a competition or something, that they always have a good breakfast, just because I know I can't think without a little protein. So
it's I don't know if it's protein. It's the whole breakfast effect has been so it has been studied, of course. And I think Holly Miller did some nice work where she looked at blood sugar levels, and she saw it was a very nice experiment, I think, where dogs were been trained to they knew this kind of kibble ball that they would roll around and food would come out. And she divided the dogs into two groups. One group was given the self-control task to sit down and just stay put for 10 minutes. And then given this kibble ball without kibble in it. And the other group of dogs was put in a crate for 10 minutes, same amount of time, not doing anything. But the dogs in the crate didn't have to exercise any self-control. They just couldn't go anywhere. And then looked at those dogs too. How long do they continue working with a kibble ball with no kibble in it? And the dogs had to execute self-control. They only went on for about a third, or less than a third of the time than the other ones did. They gave up more easily because self-control had just depleted their blood sugar level, and they just couldn't manage to keep up anymore. And the interesting thing is, you then give them some sugar water, it revives.
Interesting.
So wow. Self-control is something I see. So you really have to think about what that means for whenever you're doing work, I think the best thing is to leave the dog in the car, go and have a look at what you need to be doing first, and only then go back and get your dog, instead of taking your dog, staying down, waiting, having the dog wait there while you check out everything and you talk to everybody. I think it's much better to sort of separate the two. When you're with your dog, you're working with the dog, and when he's resting, he's resting. And don't ask him to execute self-control unnecessarily. Sometimes it's necessary, but if it's not necessary, try to stay away from it.
This is amazing. Like this has so many applicabilities to how we work.
Yeah.
And I'm actually just thinking about like my training yesterday. So and how, trying to think about my search strategy and everything. So I'm training a dog for wilderness search and rescue air scent.
Yeah.
And I was doing team training, and I had prize in a down while I was getting coached and thinking about my strategy for the search area. And she was getting like ants in your pants. Like she was getting a little antsy, wanting to get up and like, well, let's go do the thing. Let's go do the thing. And it was a little bit of a challenge. And now I'm thinking back, I'm like,
it's one of those things where you end up putting your dog in a down because you think you're going to end up going out right away. And all of a sudden you have to do all of this other stuff. And then you've sucked actually some of their working life out of them.
Yeah. Well, sometimes things will happen that you have to, sometimes, but if it's possible to stay away from it, then think of what you're doing to your dog and see if you can find him, if you can put him somewhere else. Not execute self-control, because that's basically the thing.
Yeah, this. I mean, I really should have just handed the leash to my flanker so that I could just kind of think about what I was doing, so that in that case, or,
left her in the car,
getting coached rather than having her in a down.
Right. Yeah.
And so just even I'm just having this aha moment right now. So I just want to kind of thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. This is great.
So
thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
And then going back to the rats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting a prey animal and Crystal's like putting out, are they naturally nocturnal?
Yes, they are. They're definitely not animals that will go out in the broad daylight. So using them there are definitely some limitations to it. To begin with, you have to get them socialized, because they're going to be working with people, and they don't know exactly how social this animal is as a species. It's taken them quite a while to get their breeding program working. So it's not that they're not definitely not pack animals, and the females are picky in who they will mate with. So
wow,
good for them.
Yes. Of course,
not great for a breeding program, but
wow.
But they get socialized to people from young, and they grow up, and they when they're operational, they try to work them early in the morning. So first thing, that basically they're taken out. You can't work outside unless there's enough light for you to see, because in the areas that require demining, there are no lamps along the roads or anything. So it needs to be daylight. So you get them out while it's still dark, and go to the places where they work operationally. And as soon as it's daylight, that's when their work starts. And they don't take it on too long, because they're also they like to sleep during the day, but they also are not very good at the sunlight is not very good for them. Mm-hmm. So you try to get them out of the sun as quickly as you can. And actually in countries where there's a lot of UV light in the sun, the sun's strong, they also rub them in with suntan lotion to protect their skins and their ears.
Oh, wow.
Right.
I'm not used to that as well.
Oh, wow.
So there are limitations in that respect. But the dogs basically are worked in the same way, as early in the morning as possible, because it's still a nice temperature for the animals to work. Because usually these landmines are laid in countries where it's really hot.
Okay, yeah.
Ukraine's a different story. That's going to be a whole novel experience. But but basically you need to be good circumstances. In some countries where, like in Bosnia as well, where it's sometimes if you start too early, it's still too cold. So if you're just emerging into the season early on in the year, you can start later on in the day with the dogs, because then the temperature is better. That means that the scent is also coming out of the ground more, so that's good. But with the rats, you really have to also pay attention to the fact that they are nocturnal animals, and you want them to be working at a moment in time when they still can.
So the differences between teaching a rat a search pattern and a dog. a search pattern, or is it about the same?
No, because initially it is the same in the sense that you teach them a motor pattern, which means that you have to walk straight ahead. Except for dogs, it's 10 meters, and for rats, it's shorter. But you walk ahead straight, and then you turn the dogs are taught to turn to the left and then come searching in a straight way back. And that is for the long leash dogs. So the dogs work perpendicular to the person. So you're standing and the dog works away from you and then returns coming back to you. And in the beginning, this is, you're sort of boxed in. The dog works between wooden planks and learns that search pattern to just go 10 meters and come back, and 10 meters and come back, and 10 meters come back. And lots of things can be used in this stage. You use food, then they migrate to pieces of cotton, but they teach this search pattern. And then when the boards are taken away, and then it just becomes ribbons, and then the ribbons are taken away, and then it's just one ribbon, and then it becomes, they search the straight line, and they turn back, and they use the leash that has gone out. They use the leash as a guiding line on the way back. So the dogs migrate in their search pattern from being confined to learning the motor pattern to executing this completely free. The rats are taught to do this they're wearing a little harness, and the harness is attached to a lead, and the lead is attached to a rope that is between the two handlers. So they are always limited. They never become free searching, not the way the dogs become free searching. So their pattern is more or less guided by walking from one handler to the other handler, and then the handler stepping aside, and then they walk they search the way back. So in that respect, it's the same search pattern in the sense that it's straight ahead and come back, straight ahead and come back, but the dogs do it more independently than the rats at some point.
Well, how long, so I'm kind of picturing, how long you can have a dog working, at a time. And I don't how long can a rat work without, are they very short time periods that they work, or can they work longer time periods?
It all depends on the circumstances where they are, and basically what they look at. I don't have the productivity figures in my head. I can probably look them up, but I'm not sure. But they have to do a certain cover a certain amount of square meters a day. So
Gotcha.
that's what they need to do. So
okay. So then how they do that would just depend on the...
Yeah, it depends on the circumstances, because if it gets too warm, with dogs for sure, you can see that they start to pant. And if they start panting, they can't possibly be sniffing anymore.
Right.
So you need to terminate what they are doing, and you need to give them a rest. And the same is with the rats as well. You can see that they get tired, and then you need to sort of take them out and just let them put them back in the cages and wait and take out another rat.
How long does it take to train a rat to do that?
I think by the time it's a process where they are the training is basically depends a little bit on what you include in the training, because the socialization is necessary, and that starts right when they are when they're being weaned. So that's when they're very young. And then they develop all sorts of social skills and interacting with the people. They're clicker trained. They definitely need to understand the clicker. And then they first are trained to associate tea eggs. TNTs and tea eggs, and they're on top of a sand table. They learn to associate the odor of the TNT and the tea eggs, or basically the tea eggs with something. And then blank tea eggs are put out, and then they're sort of buried. All of this is still happening at the training center in Apopo, close to the office. And then the next stage is when they go out into the fields. They have the biggest minefield Tanzania doesn't have a mine problem. They created a big minefield just for the training of the rats. And what part of that is where the tea eggs are buried and they're being used. And then later it moves into really working on landmines in boxes, much in the same way as the training fields are everywhere. So they graduate. It's a whole stepwise procedure. And then before they are deployed, they depends on where they go. But if they're moving to a country where there are no giant African pouch rats, they are neutered, which is, from a eco-conservative, for ecological conservation, I should say.
Right.
It makes sense. You don't want them to escape and start breeding there because you don't know what you'll be upsetting. So then and then they go to the country where they are going to be deployed. And there again, it's a training procedure. The training fields are there. They need to get used to the different type of soil, the different mines that are there. They go through an accreditation process. And once they are accredited according to the standards in that country, that's when they become operational.
Wow.
So it's a whole process. And there are a couple of internal tests that they need to be doing as well whilst in training. And I think that sort of takes about a year altogether.
Wow.
That they really are operational in another country.
When they're looking for these mines, how deep can the mines be?
Oh, it depends. The anti-tank mines can be quite deep. But the anti-personnel mines are usually at the surface. And the longer these mines are in the ground, the bigger the chances that they will have moved a little bit with the water flow.
Oh.
And sometimes, countries have been meticulous in documenting where they put the mines, but then you miss mines, because at some point, there's a whole series of mines here and they've been planted in a certain pattern. And then all of a sudden you miss a mine. It wasn't there. So where has it gone? You need to look for it outside of where the mine was planted. And that's where, if you know this is a whole bandwidth of a kilometer wide and there've been mines planted in a certain shape here, then you can have the manual deminers come in and they will take them out because they know where to expect them. But especially when if you lose a mine somewhere, where did it go? Where do we start searching? Their animals are quite useful again.
Wow.
Yeah. And the good thing with animals is that they are good at discriminating landmines from fragments. So you can have, especially if you're in post-blast areas where there's a lot of debris, and there's a lot of metal content. If you have manual deminers go in there with their metal detectors,
they're not going to be able to tell the difference. Yeah.
No, because these anti-personnel mines, they're plastic and they have very, very limited metal in them. Just near the fuse. So if people like that have to find these mostly plastic mines, they have to be really aware that as soon as they hear something metally, that they have to respond. But then if there's a lot of fragments in the ground, you're digging up every fragment. It takes forever and ever.
Well, it also sounds like if you actually do get a metal signature, you might be really close, and at that point, it's really dangerous.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
But it takes a lot of training to start with, and for the training of the rats, they really use these tea eggs. Do you know what tea eggs are? They're basically little containers. They're made of stainless steel. And
like a diffuser?
Yes, like a diffuser. Yeah.
Okay.
They're the shape of an egg, and you can hang them in. You can either put herbs in them or fresh tea, and you put them into the tea. So it's stainless steel, which is great. It doesn't break, it doesn't get rusty, and you can put tea in, and it has holes all over it, so the odor comes out quite nicely. And you can put them on the ground or in the ground. And other rats become quite fond of them, and they start picking them up and carrying them around. The training, you don't want that, so that's then you move to the next stage quite quickly.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
How close do they have to be to detect the mine? Do they have to be right on top of it?
There are. Let me see if I'm going to word this correctly. There are guidelines that they have to meet, and those are international mine action standards guidelines. They have a whole batch of them that say exactly set the standards for every piece of equipment that you use in demining, for all of the protocols that you use in demining, and also for what the animal should be capable of doing. And basically, the distance that an animal may respond to has to be closer than a meter.
Okay.
Okay.
Because you can imagine that if you have a really big mine that is quite low in the ground, and it's been there for a long time, what happens is that the TNT will migrate to the surface, but that's a process that is dependent on rain and evaporation.
Oh,
so the
yeah.
rain,
Yeah.
the rain will take some of the TNT down with it, and through evaporation, everything will come back up. So the area around the landmine where you actually find TNT bits and pieces or molecules on top of the soil becomes quite wide.
Right.
So from the center, it's not directly on top of the mine, but it sort of becomes like a ring around. And usually it's not a full ring, but it's more of a ring in the direction of where the general water flow is going.
Makes sense.
So on the hill, it will be even more. So they've set up this guideline. It has to be within a meter. And that means that if a rat or a dog indicates, a manual deminer comes in and he knows exactly which area to clear, which is then takes all of that into account. So
Right.
he manually demines by prodding and trying to find out where the landmine is. Quite a big area.
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting.
Now the same happens with the dogs, actually.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if a dog indicates, exactly the same happens. Those protocols are the same.
So I think about the meticulous work that the mine dogs are having to do. And I know that you're also working on like electronics detection dogs.
Mhm.
And I think about, the odor profile of an SD card or something is really,
It's
really
crazy
small.
Yeah.
Right.
Crazy small.
And so and I'm fascinated about how your guys are working through and teaching those dogs to work. And how did you get involved in doing the electronics detection?
Well, I think that actually the mine detection dogs and the electronic detection dogs are sort of similar in the sense that both of these can only find what they're looking for if they really have this intense high sniffing behavior, this really intense sniffing behavior. These are not big odor sources that you can find easily. So it's nothing like arson or drugs, or there too you can have there are differences, but it's a really, really tiny scent picture that you're looking for. So you really want animals that have this really high sniffing intensity in order for them to be able to sniff out what they're looking for.
Are there breeds that are generally more generally more useful with I'm kind of thinking about that, like the type of sniffing that you're looking for. Do you look at certain breeds to do that?
I think breeds are in the tropics and in the heat. The toughness of a Malinois is really incredible.
Yeah.
So that's where you would be looking for these crazy Malinois that will carry on, until they drop dead.
Gotcha.
So in that respect, it's more of the physical hardness of these dogs. That makes them suited for that kind of work.
Gotcha.
It's not particularly their sniffing ability. Also, minefields are actually very boring. Nothing is happening. It's very silent usually. So you can even have quite reactive dogs doing this kind of work because nothing else is happening out there. You're very lonely, very boring. You just continue doing the same old work. But you need to be very hard because of the temperatures and because of and the thorns that are there. It's a tough world, demining. For work with what we call the digidogs, electronics detection, electronic storage devices detection. There, it's just working indoors and finding nooks and crannies and stuff like that. And what I do find is there are some dogs that have more of a tendency to run than others. But I think basically the thing that we like to do with the police here, and which is also done in demining, is to really start off difficult. So having a clear picture, but a small odor picture, so that there's no chance of hitting it if you're running around like a crazy mutt, because then you're going to bypass it. That's not going to work. You have to slow down. You have to. And by slowing them down, then you need to find the balance between going fast enough to be efficient, but slow enough to be effective. And that's also something that with electronic storage device dogs as well. We train them hard, we train them on the SD cards, we train them on very small scent pictures, and then the phones and the hard disks and laptops, we get those for free. And if they get too much of that, they speed up, which is why the training goes back to the basics, towards the small scent pictures. So we teach them that through their own experience. We're not forcing them to go slow, because that would be counterproductive.
Can't do that.
But we're teaching them that you can only find something. You will only have success if you go slow and intense.
Yeah, there's so much applicability to just general, training there for all of our listeners to kind of think about, like, do you start, searching with, stronger odor? Do you start with, lower concentrations of odor? It's that, it's got my brain's kind of like bouncing all over the place, just kind of listening.
Yeah, I think it's the same everywhere. I think it's easier to speed up a slow dog than it is to slow down a fast dog. Huh?
Oh, yes.
Preach.
Definitely.
Yes.
I'm like, you're going, yes.
So I think there it's good to start, like with anything. If you're teaching a dog to sit, what you want is to, if he's performing the behavior, you need to add a cue to it, and the cue needs to be clear, right? You don't need to shout.
Right.
There's definitely no need to shout. But what you do need to do is to have it not say, "Why did you go and sit now for me, baby?" That's not what you want to say, because the word sit isn't clear.
Right.
So you want to have a pause, sit. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's a clear cue. So it needs to be clear, but it doesn't need to be big. And that's true for odors as well. It has to be clear. It has to be a clear cue, and not messed it up with lots of other stuff. But it doesn't need to be a big cue. And that's where, in my mind, the best thing to do is to, like use the word sit as clearly as possible. What you want your dog to focus on, it has to be like the smallest thing and the smallest common denominator, or the one thing that you're absolutely sure is going to be present in all of the targets that you want to find. So with drugs, I would really advocate using as pure cocaine as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So the pharmaceutical grade, which hardly has any odor, by the way. It's really hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start them on that, then all of the versions where the methylbenzoate just comes booming off, they will find that as well. But they will also find the really very valuable, really pure cocaine, which you otherwise might miss if you're training on the methylbenzoate. If you have really pure cocaine, not a lot of methylbenzoate comes off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are the things that you need to understand. And that's something that, whenever I'm teaching as well, I really try to tell people, before you even start training your dog, you have to understand what you're actually training on. You have to understand your training material. You have to delve into it. You have to have some idea of what it is like. I mean, if you're in conservation, I'm sure you know that as well. If you know nothing about the species that you're going to be finding, then how are you going to be able to teach your dog what to look for?
Yep. Exactly.
I'm just listening to this, and I like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You have a book.
You have a book.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where I think people underestimate the value of knowing, like you have graphs in here on the schematic overview of the olfactory stress system, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's one of those things of knowing how those little neurons and everything connect. And it's, okay. We're going to link in the show notes where people can buy your book because it's a fabulous book. I've read it.
And the
several
book is
times.
called the title.
Training Dogs to Use Their Nose, a Blueprint.
When you wrote this book, what did you like? Who's your target audience? Is it?
It's basically, I think it's for everyone who's training dogs, who's been hearing a lot of stories and cannot sort of put it together, sort of gets lost with all of the information coming in and not able to translate everything they hear into some kind of coherent training strategy.
So really all of our listeners.
Yeah, everybody.
Yes.
Well, and if you just, I mean, it's one of those things that just looking through the table of contents, as somebody who's been looking into and working detection dogs, I'm learning stuff, and it's even just the different ways to think about the stuff that I already know.
Exactly.
And it's super easy to read. Gives you talks about generalization and some of that stuff that we miss a lot of the time that I think is really, really important. And of course, I love the train, test, train, test, train, test part. So, and I think it's really important.
I think the reason I called it a blueprint was because I really do think that if you follow like the basic strategy, at least you're forcing yourself to think of everything and taking things one step at a time. But what I hate is people coming in and for training, and then you ask them, what do you want? What's your goal for today? And say, oh, just put out something. And we'll see how it goes.
Preach.
No, I don't like that. I think either because you can only train one thing at a time if you're training well, if you're training to improve. So you must have some kind of strategy. You must say, okay, today I would like to train on perfecting the indication, which means that if you are doing that, if you're focusing on the indication, then don't do a search in an area where you've never been before, because all sorts of funny things may happen. There may be drafts that you have no idea exist there. So you don't even know if the dog is going to be able to recognize the odor plume. You don't know what kind of distractions are going to be popping up that may confuse him. If you're working on the indication, take care that your searching is not too difficult. Also, do not take a completely novel training aid, because if you're focusing on, if you want to see if he can recognize a completely novel training aid, that's a different kind of exercise. Then you're training, which means you're teaching him to improve himself. It's not a test to see if he recognizes it, but it's a training, which means that if he does show a change of behavior sufficiently enough that you think, hey, this would be good enough for me operationally to say he's just found something, but this is completely novel for him. I'm not going to push him to the limits in terms of identification. I'm going to reinforce this because it will just then add this, whatever variation is, to his library of odors that he wants to be happy, is going to be happy with, and will indicate. So take it one step at a time. And if you really look at that well, if you are wanting to practice a novel search environment, then again, take an odor that the dog's comfortable with, and don't push the limits of the indication up to 5 seconds, but accept that a 2-second indication is good enough too. So, but you have to understand that and be systematic about it. And if you put all of these little details into your training plan, even just being able to tell what you want to have done in a certain day, you need to talk about your indication, you need to talk about the searching and how everything is set up and what you want your dog to be doing, where you want him to find something, and you need to think about the odors and the distractions, the other kind of odors that are there. So if that information is not in your goal, then what are you training?
Amen.
Yes.
I know.
But
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
just
that-
like I want to put like a highlighter over everything that you've just said, and I
Yeah.
want to like blast it out to all of my students to just say, "This is important. Just listen to this."
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
But it's difficult being an instructor because an instructor has to both train the dog and educate the person.
Mm-hmm.
And those things may clash.
Yes. Frequently.
Yeah. And I don't know what it's like in the US, but here, the people that are called the kynological instructors, they're focusing on, they're being taught how to teach people. They're not really being taught how to train a dog. So that's one thing.
Yes.
And the other thing is,
Mhm.
if you know how to train a dog, then what makes you a really good instructor is if you can you see what the dog is understanding, you see what the dog is learning, because what you're putting into it also has to be accepted. So there's a difference between teaching and learning. So you're looking at what the dog is learning, and you're keeping an eye on the person who's handling him, and you stop whatever's happening at the right point in time, so the dog doesn't get completely confused, and you can explain things to the person handling the dog, and you may not be optimally instructing the person, because this person may be the kind of person that really learns from mistakes and making mistakes himself, herself, and then changing, but then you've ruined the dog. So there's this balance in between that you need, and it's a fine balance that you need to. But I think a really good instructor has the ability to teach a person, but also has the capability of seeing when the dog starts becoming confused. He doesn't need to be a great trainer himself, but he does need to be able to explain it to the person and keep tabs on the dog. Because it's a pity if the dog sort of loses the idea of what he's supposed to be doing.
It's a little bit of an art and a science kind of all
Mashed. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a craft. Yeah.
It is, that's a better
It's a
way
craft.
to put it. It's a craft. It is.
Well, I think there's a wonderful book by Jennifer Zeligs called Animal Training 101, The Art and Science of Behavior Modification. Absolutely wonderful book. It's really was one of the books I really, really like. So
I see Robin taking notes, so I'm sure we're going to
good.
put that one into the show notes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you should put that one in. That one is tougher to read than my book.
Your book, when we think about, is it is it geared for the advanced practitioner?
Yes.
Is it geared? Okay.
I don't think. I mean, as someone who I think someone who doesn't know a lot can read it. But the more you know, the more information is in there. Because
Gotcha.
you sort of already have a couple of clothes hangers, and you find more and more clothes can be put on that. If you don't have some kind of inkling yet, it's difficult to sort of be able to translate that into the practicality. So I know I've been teaching people. I've been in courses like this for a long time, and at one point I had a guy in the police have two mornings that I had done. And then later he had to stop, sick or something. And a year later he came back and he said, "I'll do the first two days again." And the first time he had just begun with the dog, and the second time he'd already been working for a year. And he said, "Did you do the same thing this year as you did last year?" Or maybe it was 2 years ago. I said, "Yes." But I've learned so much more now. But that's because he knew more, and the more you know, the more you can, the more it helps.
Canine Detection Collaborative! We appreciate the time you spend with us. If you liked this episode, not only should you follow us so you don't miss the next one, but please also rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. For info on collaborating with us, go to K9DetectionCollaborative.com. That's K9Detectioncollaborative.com, where you can find our socials and pick up our latest monthly freebie. Join us again to talk training in the next episode.